All right, Dennis. I know we kind of done this before, and you went to Taiwan. Is it last year? Yeah, it's last year. But still, uh, can you like introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Dennis Logan. 20, geez, it's hard to say that, but about 20 years now in strength and conditioning. Kind of bounced around, did a lot of different things, spent a good part of my career at Exos, formerly Athletes Performance, where I worked for them in a number of different roles. I was in education. I worked for them in like their military division, combine prep. I worked with some of the pro players. After about 10 years there, left and took a position with the Cleveland Browns where I was an assistant strength and conditioning coach. I was there for about a year, and then I got an opportunity to be the head of athletic performance for Munster Rugby in Limerick, Ireland. So, um, got an opportunity to run a department, be a part of a different sport that, I hadn't done in the past, being involved in rugby. And then during the pandemic, moved back home to Phoenix, started my own business, and now I essentially do consulting, education, and run my own business.
Nice, nice, nice. So, guess for those guys who didn't know that we actually worked together last year in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So you were the instructor for Exos Phase One. I was the translator.
Yep.
And like when I post those like Instagram story, you can't imagine like how many guys from Exos text me like he's the GOAT, he's the GOAT. I'm like, what do you mean the
Jeez.
GOAT?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? And I forgot it's this first, is it the first day or the second day we're teaching about like movement assessment.
Hmm.
So bef I already done my Exos phase one through phase three, and I already have like SFMA. I'm familiar with low back pain, SI joint, all these stuff, ACL return to play, whatever. But what amazed me is like, so what we do is basic, just basic FMS, not
Hmm.
even the full FMS. What we do is uh just standing toe touch and uh what is it called? Multi-segmental extension. So just extension.
Yeah.
And then I think multi-segmental rotation, if I remember
Right.
it correct. Just
Yeah.
three movement. I was
Yep.
like, and at the beginning, I was like, man, are you just only gonna teach these three? Is that enough? I was like, hmm. And then I forgot we kind of spent like 20 or 30 minutes on just one movement. And I'm amazed by how many details you can get by just one movement.
Yeah.
That was like amazing. So is that like how do you develop that skill? Because before I work with you, I also work with like different instructors from Exos. Everybody's good. Everybody have their own style, but like the way you approach, the way you like the attention to detail kind of amazed me. How do you develop that skill?
Wow. Well, one, thanks for the kind words, man, and thanks for, telling me what everybody I always appreciate hearing feedback and it's humbling for sure. Uh it it sounds the simple answer would be you just got to do it, and it takes a lot of experience and it takes repetition like anything. But it really does, man, like and the great thing about the general approach was you focus on one thing and master it and not get clouded by a million different options that you could take, right? So I did my FMS certification with Gray Cook in 2003. So it was before I
Oh,
got to Exos, right?
oh,
So, and it is the lens that I've been looking through for the past 21 years, right? So, am I a master at the FMS? I'm not, but I know what to look for in those movements, right? So, um, if I, it doesn't mean I haven't explored other models of movement assessment, but that one I've spent a lot of time administering, looking at, and then when you're in an environment like the one that exists at Exos, where there's an incredible attention to detail and connecting the dots and a push towards creating simple systems and not complex or complicated systems, it allows you the freedom to start to see things. You know what I mean? And there's this feeling, especially there, where we're looking for this first, and then you look for this, and then you look for, right? There's kind of like this step pattern instead of trying to look at everything. Can I see everything? No, you can't see everything at once, but you could see one thing at a time, and that will give you information. So, um, the I guess this is a long-winded answer to your question, but it is one, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of repetitions with your eyes, but those only really become valuable when you're training your eye to see one thing at a time because it's too hard to take in everything at once, right? So I actually love the fact that you had said, man, we just did this one thing. And but from that one thing, we could then see all of these others, as opposed to we did 15 things. And I always feel like simpler is better. And by simpler meaning fewer things to get a greater picture.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just movement assessment. It's everything. I think is it 4 day or 5 day? I can't remember.
It's 4 days.
So like throughout the 4 days is like movement assessment, like movement skill and movement preparation. Everything's like really basic, but you kind of link everything together. I
Yeah.
remember we were like teaching the mock drill, A skip, B skip, like pop flow skip, and we're gonna progress from acceleration to max velocity. And I was used to like how Brock and like Russ teaches it. So I was like, you kind of like use your own way to teach it. And it's like they get it like really fast. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like we used to like what used to happen is we we see all those drills at the mentorship the first time and we need to go back and practice for weeks to get it
Yeah.
and to know how to like perform it. They like perform they're able to perform it right away. I was like, wow, that was awesome.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I remember that. And all of the movements and the shapes are the same, right? Like if you tell people that they're different and they think that they're different and you coach them differently, then you're going to get a huge amount of variation in what you're going to see. And I don't want to make it seem like variation is bad, but learning, in my opinion, the consistency between what the elements are, especially within movement, when you're teaching, it's really important on the front end. And so when you can reinforce the shapes that make the patterns effective and show how they show themselves and demonstrate how they show up in all of these different contextual environments, acceleration, absolute speed, right? It's all flexion, extension, and rotation, right? Like at the end of the day, it's all flexion, extension, rotation. The body position may be slightly different. And so the nature of flexion, extension, and rotation in terms of how you apply force through those movements may be a little bit different. Accelerations at this angle. So the way that you express flexion primarily and then into extension is going to be slightly different than when you're at absolute speed. But the concept that it's just all flexion, extension, and rotation doesn't change. So if you can continue to reinforce this paradigm that, listen, yeah, going from here to here is different, but what you do is not really that different. It's still flexion, extension, and rotation. So focus on those things. Then it becomes a bit more palatable and becomes easier to conceptualize, right? It's like, oh, okay. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing. Yes, you're just really doing the same thing. Position's different. So if you do this and you do it here, you're 90% of the way there, right? As opposed to this is a completely different movement. This is a completely different action. This is a completely no, it's not. It's not a completely different action. There are some differences, but it's not completely different. It is still flexion, extension, and rotation. If you reinforce that everywhere, then all of a sudden these things they layer onto each other to where it starts to emerge in everything, and you go, "Oh my God, that looks exactly the way I want it," because you've you've developed the ability to express it everywhere, right? So, um, again, I told you before, and I mean it, man. Like, I don't think that I'm an expert at any of this stuff, but I feel like I found a way to see it that just kind of works for me, and it's simple. And if we can reinforce those concepts, I think it just makes movement easier for people.
Nice, nice. And I'm glad that you brought up system because I know Exos emphasize system a lot.
Yeah.
So is this the concept of the system is before you go to Exos, or you kind of create this? Because I know you're part of know you're part of like the creator or like the the creator or like for the Exos mentorship, right?
Okay, so I definitely joined early on when education was starting to become central to what Exos did. I would err on the side, I would have said I'm not necessarily a creator. I've helped create some things, but the system is definitely something that I was taught, right? It's something where when I got there, it was taught to me. The evolution now of that system, again, we're talking, I joined 17 years ago and it has definitely evolved. I may have been part of the evolution of it, but definitely not the creation of it. Um, and yeah, I've had a hand in the education part and kind of how we express it and how we teach it for sure. I've been involved in how we teach it, but I don't know if I would say I was involved in creating it.
Yeah, I got you. But so this like the system concept,
Mm.
because Exos has like what is it? Foam rolling, then dynamic stretching, all the way down, like how they do it, the way they do it. Is it a thing that kind of like, because I remember when like last year we were talking about this, I said this is kind of in my blood. I already
Yeah,
know this.
yeah.
Is it the same with you, or like kind of like evolve and have your own thing now?
I think it's a little bit of both, man. It is definitely in my blood. Um, I believe I spent my most time there. It makes the most sense to me. I remember when I had first even considered applying for the internship there, it just like the little that I had known going into it, it spoke to me. And then what I was exposed to when I was there was like, yeah, this is the way things should be done. I have a very systems oriented. I like to put things in order, um, organizational mindset to begin with. And so I just kind of connected to the way that they do things, um, uh, really well. And what I appreciate about it is when you said, did I develop my own? What the system allows for is for that. It allows for that expression and it allows for you to be able to create because what they're essentially doing is they're essentially saying, all right, here are like the vessels, here are like the glasses, here are the buckets. What you put into it is now on you, right? So what you pour into the bucket we're not telling you to put in there, but we're just saying that this bucket should go here. And more than anything, the overarching theme is then there is a need for organization because a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, especially young ones like myself, don't have things organized and don't have things in a system where we can then operate consistently with the delivery of our programs. It can be scattered. Some days we do this, some days we do that, and there's no real and I'm speaking largely for myself. That was the kind of coach I was before I got to Exos where it was like, "Oh, awesome. Here's an order that I can do things in while then being able to choose what it is I do."
Yeah, it's the same with me that I think it's 5 or 6 years ago. Before I go to Exos, I was like, I want to do everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I want to do everything. But after I go to Exos, I finish like the mentorship. I'm like, okay, now I can do this with the order. I know how to do it, things with the order and achieve it.
Exactly.
And what's great about it is like Exos like produce results. Like they have good results, NFL Combine, NBA Combine. So that shows that just follow the system that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And the secret to it, Eric, is when you have a system, it allows you to be consistent because the consistency is what creates the success, right? Like, and so that's why the system creates an accountability around delivering things on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And if you do things consistently, the results will come, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember talking to like Dwayne Bradshaw,
Mm.
used to be at Exos. He's currently at Dallas Maverick
He's
right
with the
now.
Mavs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember we were talking about like I think the first time he was doing the combine prep for Exos, and I know Exos has their own system, their own framework, how to do things. And I think it's like the first I think he kind of mentioned, is it the fourth or the fifth week? He was like, "What are we doing right now? The number is not showing.
Yeah.
Numbers going down." And he was like, "Man, he's frustrated. He's
Yeah.
stressed. These guys need to be like top notch, but he's stressed." And he said, "But he just followed the system, and at
Yeah.
the combine, the result just showed itself." I'm like, "That was
Yeah.
amazing." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's an incredible process and it's a valuable one for combine prep for coaches to go through because it that is, at least for me, has been the truest expression of learning the the nuances of strength and conditioning and residuals of performance and how long it legitimately takes for these strength qualities to appear, right? Like these things take time to appear. It takes time for the adaptation to take place. But if you trust the process and you follow the system, yeah, it works.
yeah, yeah. So the reason I kind of also emphasize the system is because like I mentioned, Exo's kind of in my blood. So
Hmm.
I use it since like six or I can't remember, 5 or 6 years ago, after I finished all the mentorship,
Hmm.
and just stick with me. And I came to like I transitioned from Taiwan to Louisville like 2 years ago, and it like now at this era, everybody's used like sport technology, force plate, catapult, GPS, 3D motion capture,
Hmm.
1080.
Yeah.
And when I was in Taiwan, I don't have those stuff.
Yeah.
And University of Louisville, they're like D1 Power 4 school. We have everything we want. You have everything you want. And coaches are using these stuff for like years.
Mm.
So before I came, I was like, man, am I gonna be like really bad at this? Am I gonna be like kind of stupid, like just coming from Taiwan, uh, don't know anything? So what really happened is I just showed up there. And what's really cool is I just do whatever Exos did. I
Right.
just focus on movement pattern. I just mo focus on sprinting mechanic, change of direction mechanics at the first day.
There you go.
At the first day, the athlete,
Go.
trust
I'm
me.
sorry, 1 second.
No,
Go get it, buddy. And then please get the dog to stop. Sorry, go ahead.
no. So at the first day, the athlete trust me.
Yeah.
Like the first day D1 Power 4 basketball player, they trust me.
Hmm.
They want me to help them with their sprinting mechanics. I was like,
Yep.
man, this is so cool. And just keep showing. I'm able to teach coaches like they use force play for like years. I'm able to teach them like the science behind force play, the
Yeah.
science behind those numbers, and the science behind catapult, the science behind GPS. That was really awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't know, quote like Vern Gambetta, which is also like really legendary strength coach. He just
Hmm.
posted a few days ago that everybody is focusing on sports science, but we're losing the basic. We're losing the foundation, which is I think the same thing I saw. I kind of share with you before we start recording is like People are focusing too much on force plate data. People are focusing too much on catapult data. A simple change of direction, they can't train it. They don't know how to train it. So, well, I think that's kind of why I was like fascinated by the system. And I
Yeah.
finally understand why they use system.
Yeah. The irony in all of it, right? I've said this before in a presentation, and it's something that I believe. We don't have a data problem. We have a knowledge transfer problem, right? The issue isn't collecting information. The issue is in what do we do with it? And the irony is the information is coming from performing movements, right? When you're testing somebody with a force plate, when you're testing somebody with any piece of technology, what you're doing is you're capturing the movement. And then there are a number of different metrics that are spit out. But essentially, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're looking at a jump, you're looking at a reactive jump, you're looking at sprint mechanics, you're looking at whatever it is. And so if you execute that movement and it gives you the information, and then you have the information in front of you, even if you were able to interpret the data and say, okay, this person needs this, this, and this to be better, but you don't know how to get the person to move so that that result happens, then the fact that you have that data doesn't mean anything. You, right? Like you can't put the cart before the horse. The value in having the data should be in that you then also have the requisite knowledge, skill set, information, whatever, to impact the data, which means you know how to impact movement. You know what I mean? And so, um, learn how to coach movement before any piece of technology is utilized. Like that to me is something that is used last on anybody or in anybody's sort of progression as a strength coach. Now, I think it's incredibly valuable given that you know how to improve the numbers the feedback that it gives back to you. If you don't, then they're just numbers, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I like I like how you the way you express it. I know we're kind of supposed to kind of talk about like change direction, but this is like I want to talk about this more.
For sure.
So I remember the first podcast we did. It was like la also last year, and it was before Exos. I
Yeah.
remember like I was a translator, so I was supposed to like translate like your past experience to the students there or the coaches at Taiwan. I
Hmm.
remember I saw like you're at Exos, you're at Cleveland Brown, you're at Muscle Rugby. I feel like, man, this guy must know a lot about force plate or catapult. So I messaged you, shit said, can we do a podcast? I remember asking you about that, and you just go back to the basic, understand
Yeah.
movement, understand how they express movement. That's the most important thing. And at that time, I understand it, but at the same time, I don't understand it. But now I get it.
Now you get it.
Yeah, now I get it. I feel
Nice.
that.
Awesome. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. So I'm gonna jump into like the real topic I want to talk about today is change of direction.
Yep.
So, uh, everybody had their own way of teaching change of direction or like movement pattern. Can you kind of share like I know a few years ago Exos do shuffle and crossover and kind of evolve. So, how about you? How do you view or how do you categorize like change of direction movement patterns?
Yeah. So again, not necessarily a very far departure from Exos, but maybe a bit of a step back for me, right? So as I'd mentioned to you earlier, for me, everything is about flexion, extension, and rotation. Um, I believe that there's a hierarchy in terms of how programs are organized. So um, at the very front, at the very beginning, I believe that people should have the ability to achieve range of motion, right? Movement is first, and movement in that they can achieve certain positions without moving through space, as in shuffling or crossover. So squat pattern, we'll take as an example. The next step is, can they handle force at those positions? Can they accept force at those positions? And then last is, can they create force at those positions? So it's, can I achieve this position? Then at that position, can I accept force at that position? And then at that position, can I create force at that position? So it's one, two, three for me. If we look at change of direction, those are essentially the fundamental elements to be able to change direction well. Can I achieve this position? Can I achieve this position accepting load? Because that's what change of direction is. It is eccentric at the start. It's eccentric first. And then can I create force out of this position? If any one of those things is not a capability of the person, one, bilaterally, two, more importantly, unilaterally, then they can't change direction well, in my opinion. So if we think about now, movement, force continuum, eccentric, isometric, concentric, and then the ability to demonstrate those things, I'm going to use the word asymmetrically, so not purely unilaterally, staggered stance, frontal plane, rotationally, where it's not a true like bilateral weight distribution, then they probably can't do that well. They probably won't change direction well. It sounds like a lot. Oh, it sounds like, but then it's just now expose them to those things. The choice in strategy, shuffling, crossover, open step, close step, those choices will be determined by the athlete in the context of what they're doing, and then the abilities that they have, which were predetermined by the things that I just said. If they don't have the ability to achieve a certain position and accept force in that position, then the strategy that they're going to choose is going to change, right? So what I've got to do is, I feel like my role as a strength coach is to first, one, provide them with the abilities, and then two, just have them enter into the environment where they then choose the strategy that they want, but that strategy will emerge based on the abilities that I've helped them develop. So I don't know if that was like, I don't know if you understood all of that or if that was long-winded. I think you understood it, but for me, I personally am less about teach you this mechanic, teach you that mechanic, teach you this and this, as opposed to, I know that you need this ability, and this ability, and then I'll help develop those. And then after that, put you in the environment for you to then select the strategy that you need, and the abilities that you've developed should inform the strategy that you choose, which will be the correct one for you.
This is really awesome. Really awesome. Because we were, this is also before recording, we were talking about like all these research, and I'm part of the research like deceleration project right now.
Hmm.
And like we kind of see on the numbers that like it's kind of like coincide with Damien Harper. What he did is like when we do a change of direction or like deceleration, the penultimate step or pre-penultimate step is the most important thing.
Hmm.
However, so when I look at those stuff, I was like, am I missing something? Because I feel like when I was at Exos, they would never teach me this.
Yeah.
But I feel like is Exo is like or like am I missing something? But the other thing is like when I talked to Lee Taff, he didn't mention that either. And
Mm.
also when I talked to Coach Boo, he said he didn't mention that in change direction either. I was like,
Right.
so then I reach out to those guys and like he's like, yeah, that's the thing. If you do close drill, you will have pre-penultimate and penultimate. But if it's on the court, just like you mentioned, the athlete is going to select what's best for their environment. And
Exactly.
and because team sport, you're not gonna like do a change direction. You're not gonna be able to like lateral shuffle 5 meter. You're not gonna be like do 5 meter straight excel, then back pedal back like 5 meter. That's not a thing for like team sport. So no, you're not gonna have those stuff. teach them a basic movement pattern, and
Yes.
they're gonna select it itself.
Exactly. Exactly right. There is no way for us to be able to anticipate the chaos and the random combinations that they're going to have to do during their environment. What we can do, though, is provide them with the tools and the skill sets and the abilities to be able to execute those things when they choose to select them. So the desire to refine a technical ability with the belief that that technical ability will show itself, I think I don't know if it's the best approach, man. Like, I really believe we understand generally what's going to happen. Deceleration involves eccentric forces that need to be greater than the force that they're experiencing. So they need to be eccentrically strong. It's going to involve some type of movement quality, range of motion related that they're going to need to have. And then they're going to have to be able to express force, hopefully fast enough, quick enough, and in the direction that they're going to need to do it in. If we develop that and then say, all right, go now and play, but now you have these abilities, then what they choose is going to be the right choice. And that's different for everyone. That's different for everyone. You know what I mean? I was a corner. I played cornerback and I'm 5'7". The choices that I made multi-directionally at my position are going to be different than if I were 6 foot. You know what I mean? Like it's just gonna change. So yeah, I've always erred on the side, Eric, of providing the athlete with the most robust ability, physical ability, and then letting the sport dictate their selection. Now there can be, yes, we can teach some things. I'm not saying there's no coaching. But I'm saying I feel like there's probably a little less coaching than we anticipate when it comes to that stuff.
Man, you can't imagine how excited I am right now. I'm like, man, every time I talk to you, I feel like I learn a lot of stuff. And mine is like exploding right now.
Good.
Like, yeah, yeah. My mind is exploding right now. Like before we did this, I was listening to like different stuff and I spent a lot of time. Like I re basically read not gonna say all, but almost every research on change of direction, deceleration. And I was like,
Mm,
yeah, I get this, I get this. But like this conversation, my mind is like exploding.
sweet.
Man, that's man, people say you're the GOAT. You are the GOAT, man.
Yeah, I don't know, but I appreciate it.
So I want to dive into a little bit more detail about like how you coach or how you teach like extension, flexion when
Mm,
it comes to like change of direction.
mm.
Can you give me like the full detail like how like the movement prep, movement skill, all these stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. I could do that. Like we'd mentioned, if for those that are unfamiliar with the system, right? And I think there's going to have to be a little bit of that, right? So, um, there are components to the exo system, and the components to any system, right? You've got your sort of like your prehab, you've got your warm up, you may have some elements of movement skill, you may have certain elements of your lift as well, right? So if we're thinking about the general design of what I would consider to be most strength and conditioning programs, they're going to have those components as part of their program. For me personally, there always has to be a red thread that exists in every single element of that setup. So from prehab to movement prep to movement skill work that you're doing to then when you go into the weight room, I you should be able to see a common thread. And my general approach is that um, depending upon the dominant movement that we are doing that day and the dominant need for that movement to be successful, that becomes the primary and repeated focus. So, as an example, if we're working on acceleration and we're saying that we're working on acceleration as our focus for today, for me, the primary element of that move that I absolutely want executed is backside mechanics, looking at extension. Are all of the other elements in that? Yeah. Dorsiflexion, knee flexion, all of that stuff is important. But in my opinion, and again, I'm sure there are people that will differ with me. If I'm teaching someone acceleration, I want extension more than anything else, especially as my primary focus. And then I will progress to the others. But until I feel like that is where it needs to be, that is what I'm looking for. It is different as you experience with me when I look at absolute speed or max velocity. I want knee flexion. I think that knee height and a limitation of knee height directly influences most people's ability to execute that te technique well. Doesn't mean I don't believe in extension, but I definitely believe that knee flexion becomes front side mechanics become the primary sort of for me, they're the primary thing that I want to refine first. And therefore, everywhere in that program, from prehab, pillar prep, to movement prep, to whatever drills that we're doing, skips, whatever it is, that becomes the focus for me. It becomes the singular coaching cue. It becomes the singular reinforcement. It shows itself everything that we do up all the way through the lift. Whatever choices I'm making in the lifting portion are going to reinforce knee flexion. So, um, that's how I break it down. So when we're looking at change of direction, it then becomes rotationally, rotation becomes the primary focus for me, right? Is there flexion and extension? There is, but that is the opportunity for us to really develop. And when I say rotation, maybe that's not the best word, but maybe multi-directional applications of movement is where that starts to happen. So we progress from it just being sagittal in nature for now there being more of a multi-directional emphasis in everything that we do. And a lot of times that involves rotation.
Nice, nice, nice. So, uh, I want to like dive a little bit deeper into this, specifically about the torso,
Mm,
because like I mentioned, like a few days ago, like I was watching other coaches teach, like teaching change of direction, and you can see like you're supposed if we're turning this way, your body's supposed to like lean this way because we're putting force at that way. So your body's supposed to turn this way. But instead, some of the athlete will have the torso will like probably lean the other way.
mm.
So when it comes to torso, like how would you train this quality?
Yeah, so I think we're thinking, so I want to be clear because I think there are a couple of different ways to look at it, right? So if we're thinking about body position and the role that the torso plays in like position, like being over your center of mass, where your center of gravity is, and directional mechanics, that's one thing, versus like dissociation, creating tension through like fascial slings, things of that nature, and the role that the torso plays. If we're talking about like movement, generally speaking, we're looking at like basic physics, biomechanics, the direction that I want to move in. I'm applying force in the opposite direction. But if I'm applying force in the opposite direction, that means my center of mass is moving in the direction opposite to where the force is being applied, and my torso should follow that direction, right? So if you're saying I'm changing direction by moving this way, which means I'm applying force that way, the torso should be turning, leaning, or facing that way because that is the direction that my center of mass is moving in, right? So if I want to be able to then change direction, have balance, I need to be over my base of support and have control of my center of mass. So if my center of mass is moving that way and my base of support is moving that way because I pushed away from here, my torso needs to follow where my center of mass and base of support are going in, right? So wherever the base of support is going to be, which is usually in the direction opposite to where you're pushing, should be the direction that your torso is leaning in, traveling in, pointing in, going in.
So if the athlete is like turning the other way, like how would you correct it?
Well, the first question I would ask is why is the athlete doing it? Right? So again, what's interesting is I've we just mentioned closed skills and open skills. And what we've just discussed is a closed skill scenario, the way I've described it, right? If we're looking at all things being equal, this is how this should happen. However, if the person is changing direction, but they're also tracking somebody that is moving in a direction than what they had originally anticipated, then their torso may lean another way in anticipation of changing direction, right? So I think there are two different elements that we're talking about here. One is what is the context of that choice? The first thing is, yeah, we usually teach in closed skill scenarios because we want to create what we consider to be these fundamental technical executions of the movement. After that, though, they're out there and they're moving in space. Why is that choice being made? If the choice is being made, again, we don't know why, right? So, should you teach them like fundamentally, like everything that we've talked about? I think there's value in it. I do. I think there's value in that. I think there's value in creating the basic context and understanding of what is going to be the most efficient execution of the movement, which is the way that both you and I described. How do you teach that? Breaking it down to its component parts, right? Like you said, if that's something that is valuable, wall drills are great. You cannot have your torso move in the opposite direction when you have somebody at a 45-degree lean executing a wall drill. It gives them an understanding of where their body's going to be in space. If you then transition them from there to some type of a resisted movement and ask them to execute the same mechanic as the wall drill, then they should do that, right? So for me, and I'm sure you know this too, within the exosystem, wall drills are really great for being able to create spatial context in executing these movements. But then when you put them out in space, again, like we said, they're going to select a choice based on what they have the ability to do and what's presented to them. I think in our minds, it's a very unnatural choice to make, meaning to lean into the direction of where you're applying force. That may also give you an indication that there's something going on somewhere else, right? Like, why are they making that choice? It may be a movement pattern issue. It may be a mechanical issue. It may be because that's the only choice that they have. Then is there a thoracic spine issue? Is there right? Like this starts to open up your ability to ask certain questions around why is that the choice that they're making? Because it may not necessarily just be purely they were taught this way or they're choosing that pattern for a reason. And so I'd be curious to know what is happening around this person for them to make that choice.
Nice, nice. Because I think one of the reason I asked about chunk lean or like the chunk position is
Mm,
because like there's a research about ACL injury mechanics,
hmm
and I think the most important thing about that research is most of the ACL research, most of the ACL injury, not most, but a lot of the ACL injury that happens when they sometimes when they want to travel this way, but the torso like don't follow it, like leans
Yeah,
the other way.
for
But
sure.
but like you mentioned, it's an open skill, it's a chaotic situation. It's team sport. There's like contact. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
they probably need to like defend the player. They probably need to like follow whatever. So before this conversation, like me and other coaches, other D1 power forward, like strength basketball strength coaches, we were talking about we see all these like mechanics all the time, but not every time the ACL get blow out.
Mm,
Just some certain time ACL get blow, not all the time, but we see that those mechanics all the time.
yeah.
And why is that? Like why sometimes it happen, why sometimes it doesn't? And I think I'm trying to say what I get out of this is besides what you need to teach the basic, sometimes it's athlete's choice because they live in a chaotic situation. They have to do it.
Yeah, 100%, right? And here's the thing for me. And if anybody listening to this says he's dead wrong, I'm cool with it, right? Like I'll then teach me. I am a huge believer that injuries, things break because they're not strong enough to handle the force that is applied to them or is going through them. Period. End of story, right? Um, uh, any tears, any pulls, anything of any kind, bones, muscle, ligaments, tendons, if they break, it is because at that moment in time, the amount of force that was traveling through them, they were not capable of withstanding, right? So, in that case, I am kind of like your old school, not your old school meathead, but when I say strength matters, strength matters. Now, I'm not just talking about like high left side of the curve, strength matters. I'm just saying how you express force, remove strength and force matters. So that's why I say giving people the abilities needed to experience different types of forces becomes the central role so that when they make the choices that they make, they hopefully have the requisite force capabilities to withstand the forces that are going to happen to them. Because to your point, if they are cutting and making a move in one pair of sneakers on one surface one day and the movement looks the same, but the surface is different, or their sneakers or their cleats are less pliable because they've been worn for the force has changed. The movement looks the same, but the force that they've experienced could be entirely different. So you're saying I'm looking at this and they didn't blow their ACL out a month ago, but they may have had like brand new shoes that they were in that were a lot stiffer, that were better transmitters of force for them. So yeah, the ACL experienced less. Whereas now, if it's not as well, or now if like their foot slid inside of their shoe and it changes the direction of the force, that could be why the ACL tears. Even though the technique looks exactly the same, things tear because they're not able to handle the forces that are being put through them. So for me, the question for me is, how do we develop the adaptation or the adaptive qualities necessary for people to be able to withstand the forces at the ranges of motion that they're at, accepting them and then producing them so that they can handle them? The choices that they make, we have no control over. We don't. We don't have control that they're going to get bumped on one leg at this speed with the ball going the other way and they're trying to turn. We don't have control over that. We do have some control over how they develop the qualities to absorb those forces, right? So, yeah, like for me, it's like all of this is about force and then putting them in environments where they can express accepting and producing those forces in the manners that best fit how they move.
Man, this is awesome. This is awesome. I learned a lot. Anyway, I know I'm gonna ask this. I already know your answer, but I feel like I still need to ask this question. So, after teaching all these drill, whatever prehab, whatever movement skill, all those closed drill, would you do any like reactive drill in your training session?
Absolutely, has to happen. Because again, that's where the choices and the application is going to emerge. right? At the end of the day, they have to now start putting this stuff into the context. And at low level, it can be just basic reactive, or it can be small games, whatever. But I am a firm believer that we're doing a disservice, especially in a multi-directional environment, not including reaction and reactive either drills or just a reactive environment. I don't even like the word drills because the drills to a degree still have this element of being pre-programmed. I like the idea of the environment having a reactive demand involved, but yes, it has to be done.
Hmm. Nice, nice, nice. All right. So enough for the training questions. I'm
Okay.
gonna jump into the next part of the podcast. So, like I mentioned before, when I work with you, like Dwayne Bradshaw, Victor Hall, who else? Who else texts me? Who else texts me?
Mm.
Jay texts me, and I forgot who else texts me. Anyway, they all texted me, "You're the GOAT." And what, like the 4 days happened, I was like amazed. And after that, we kind of have this relationship. I consider you my mentor. Yeah, it is.
I think we're
Like,
friends.
no, like I talk to, bro, I talk to like, I have Dan Path, I have Coach Boo on my podcast.
Oh,
They're like, they're like the legend. But,
those are goats and those are
bro,
mentors.
but like, you guys are
They're
exactly saying the same thing.
uh,
Exact same thing. So, uh, and now you're like being a instructor, you're doing your own education. You are in our field like for 20 years, like you mentioned, 20 something years.
yeah.
So, what do you feel like our field is lacking, or like, because you're doing education right now, we're both doing education. Like, is it a shift from like basic movement pattern to technology, or like, do you think there's a shift, or like, what are we missing?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it this whole time, man, the fundamentals and movement. Um, it's not easy. You mentioned Dan Paff and Boo. Those are guys that have mastered looking at movement t twice, 2 times as long as I've been in this. They're masters because they have looked at the human body, they've seen movement, they understand movement, and I'm willing to bet that at the end of the day, they probably have a few things that they focus on, right? Like I would imagine that in their minds, there's a simple structure and a simple framework that is rooted in the fundamentals. Now, they may have a number of different modalities that allow them to be able to work on those things, but at the end of the day, I would imagine that they're not looking at 700 different things. I would imagine that they've got their key elements that help improve movement. I would think. Um, I think there's a lot of information and there's a lot of great information. I'm not someone that believes that there's a lot of shit information. I think there's a lot of great information. I think the problem is that there isn't a way for people to know what they should be learning and absorbing when. There isn't like a way for them to know that this is where I am, this is what I should learn. This information is meeting me where I am right now. So I understand it, I can execute it, I can act upon it, and I can learn from it. Um, Early on in my career at Exos, looking at people running at full speed, I couldn't see anything. Like you just like what am I like zoof. Like I don't even know where to begin. But people like Daryl Eto and Dan Path and Stu McMillan can see those things. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like simple things that they would cue that would lead to improvement, right? Um, Trying to take Stu McMillan's framework then would not work for me. Not because it isn't brilliant and because it isn't correct, because I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know what I was looking at, right? So there are frameworks out there that are brilliant, but are not necessarily going to meet people where they are. And so having like these signposts, having education that says start here, fundamentals, and not only the fundamentals, but this is what you need to be looking at, I think is what we're missing. We're missing, in my opinion, more FMS type stuff. Not the SFMA first. That's second. Start with these seven movements, these three criteria. See if you can look at these long enough to understand why this is a one or two or a three. And like that's where people need to start. And I feel like if we had that for all of like the main components of what we would consider to be human performance, if we could create that system, which Exos I think has done really well, there needs to be more of that, in my opinion.
Mm. So, in your own education, or as I know, like in your like website,
Yeah.
would you like, is this the thing that you're emphasize on, heavily emphasize on?
Yeah, my first course, which is up on the website, the Ultimate Speed and Strength Program Design Blueprint, that's where we're starting. That's what level one is, right? Level one is out right now, and that's what it is. Here is the blueprint, the framework, the understanding, and then now the tool that you can use to put this stuff into action. And I wanted there to be like what we've talked about, like here's the legend, here's the decoder ring that you need to be able to understand what these movements need, what they look like, how to categorize them, how to see them, very simply, because once you get that down and you understand why they are and where they are, it starts to make everything else clearer. And then we can move on to the next piece. So yes, the course strategy for me, which started with level one, is can we create the simplest system with the background to support why the choices are being made that will give you guidance in the choices that you make. And then here is also the tool, the template that you get with the course so that you could put that into practice. And then the next step is we're going to go a level deeper and we go a level deeper. So that's the course structure. And then on the website, there are podcasts with experts where we then now get to dive into like their expertise. So for those that are, want to know more about velocity-based training, I did my podcast with Brian Mann, and there's a document that supports that if that's what you want to do with VBT. If you're interested in integrated rotational training, right? If like rotational training is something that you're interested in, I did my talk with Omi Iwasaki, who's one of the most brilliant physical therapists out there, and there's a document that supports it, right? So there's also an opportunity for you to kind of dig into a very specific expertise or a specific element of human performance, but the course on my site is about the foundation. Let's start here. Let's lay this foundation so that when you build on it, you know exactly why.
Nice, nice, nice. So, guess second part of this question is you're already in this field for like 20 years. Everybody's saying there's like new stuff, new stuff. There's actually not no new stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, how are you gonna learn since you're already in here like 20 years and like you mentioned, like you already have so much experience. Like, or what are the things you are interested in learning right now?
Man, Jesus. There isn't anything new, but it doesn't mean that there isn't stuff that we haven't learned yet, right? So for me, human anatomy, human movement, what causes that movement is again, I think something that is fairly endless, right? Like I'm want to learn more like about fascia now. I know fascia is a huge thing, and while I have a basic understanding of it, what we know about fascia, we're continuing to learn, right? And its impact. I'm always interested in psychology. I'm always interested in communication and how people hear things. I'm really interested in the concept of constraints-led approaches, right? Creating environments versus just teaching people technique, how we can blend those things together. I was actually just having this conversation with Omi today because we're both Omi's a black belt, so I shouldn't say we're both, but Omi's a black belt in jiu-jitsu and I'm a blue belt. So he again, I learn in a classic, this is X, Y, and Z kind of approach. And he, as a black belt, he teaches out in San Diego, in California. He uses a constraints-led approach to teaching jiu-jitsu. And we were talking about it today. And, like as coaches, how you can get people to learn, how you create scenarios so that people learn, to me, that's endless, man. Like, um, teaching. Right? How can I deliver presentations that are clearer? How can we structure things so that, they make sense? Um, I don't think I've nearly come close to mastering any of those things. And I look for better ways and I love trying to learn how to improve those things.
Nice, nice, nice. I guess that's all the question I have for you today. And
Man,
still want to say this, like I talked to all these like guys. I talked to like the like I mentioned, Coach Boo, Dan Path, Lee Taft, like Brian Mann, all those legendary guys.
yeah.
Man, this is like my mind is really like exploding right now. Like I learned a lot of stuff today. Like I mentioned, I read a bunch of papers, but I feel like I learned more than those papers today. So I really love your stuff. So for those who are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they find your website? And I also know you have like your Instagram. Where can they find your Instagram?
Man, thank you. AutomatedStrengthCoach.com is both my Instagram handle and is the website. So if you go to the Instagram and you throw in my name, Dennis Logan, you'll see Automated Strength Coach will pop up. If it's easier for people, follow me on Instagram, and then the link to my website is in my bio at Instagram. So I'd say that's the easiest way. So yeah, follow on IG and then check out the website. The link is in my bio to my website. And yeah, I hope to there's a community. The big thing that there is there's a community for people to join where these conversations can be had a bit more, which is the other piece to all of this, right? Like I wanted to be able to have podcasts. I want there to be courses, but I also want there to be a community where we can have these conversations. So join up on automatedstrengthcoach.com and shoot me a message and let's start chatting.
Nice, nice.